Welcome back to the Way to Native Chronicles. I decided to make this video because every presentation I've seen on Canadian firearm storage and transport laws seems to leave out quite a few really important questions. Questions I think most responsible firearms owners want clear answers to. So in this video, I'll do my best to walk through the legal requirements and give you straight answers to those often overlooked situations, like whether you need a trigger lock in a safe or if you can keep ammo in the same place as your firearm. Before we jump in, just a bit about my background so you know where I'm coming from. My wife and I are licensed trappers and have a trap line in northern Alberta. I've held an authorization to carry for over 5 years, competed in shooting sports for several years, and worked behind a gun counter for more than 2 years selling firearms. That means many of the questions I answer in this video and on this channel in general come straight from real-world situations where people have asked me about things time and time again. Before we get into the main part of this video, I want to give you a heads up. After we cover the core laws on firearms storage and transport, I'm going to walk you through some serious legal risks that most gun owners never even heard of. These are traps hidden in the fine print, folks, and you'll want to know how to avoid them. Plus, we're going to settle one or two of the most commonly misunderstood topics out there. So make sure you stick around until the end, because you might be surprised at what you didn't know. Now, a disclaimer. The information in this video is for general awareness only and should not be taken as legal advice. For guidance specific to your situation, consult your provincial chief firearms officer or a firearms lawyer. Since once a video is published, it can no longer be changed. If the need for any corrections to this video arise, those will be noted in the description for this video, so be sure to give that a check as well. Before we dive in, if you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing by clicking like, turning on notifications, and dropping a comment below. It really helps the channel. And if you'd like to go further to support what we do here, you can click the Super Thanks button below this video or use the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Every bit of support goes straight back into making more content like this. Now, let's get into it. Whether you're a hunter, trapper, sport shooter, or simply a pal holder who stores firearms at home, you need to understand Canada's laws about how to store, transport, display, and handle your firearms safely and legally. In this video, we're walking through the federal rules laid out in the Storage, Display, Transportation, and Handling of Firearms by Individuals regulations. This regulation is part of the Firearms Act and applies to nearly every lawful gun owner in the country. You may notice that during this video I appear to be repeating myself here and there, especially on the topic of ammunition storage. If you notice that, it's because I am. This is such a convoluted topic that I believe the viewer will benefit from hearing some things said a few times over in different words. So sorry for the repetition if it bothers you, but I believe it's warranted. Okay, locked container versus gun safe. What's the difference? In this video, several references will be made to locked containers and gun safes, and it is important to be aware of the difference. A locked container refers broadly to any container or case that can be locked with a key combination or other secure method, is opaque, meaning its contents are not visible, and is not easily broken into. Examples of this would be a hard case or metal gun cases with padlocks, lockable toolboxes, or briefcases designed for firearm transport. A gun safe, on the other hand, is typically specifically manufactured for firearm storage, constructed of heavy-duty steel, equipped with internal locking mechanisms, digital keypads, or mechanical combination locks, and bolted or weighted to resist theft or tampering. While both types of storage methods can be compliant under the law, a gun safe usually provides a higher level of security and is strongly recommended, especially for storing restricted or prohibited firearms. More details on what constitutes a gun safe will be provided later in this video. Okay, storage of non-restricted firearms. Let's get into this. If you own non-restricted firearms, like most hunting rifles and shotguns, here's what the law says about storing them. Number 1, they must be unloaded. Number 2, either locked with a secure locking device like a trigger lock, or kept in a locked container, cabinet, or room that is difficult to break into. Ammo must be stored separately or kept locked up and should be reasonably secure and inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. That said, can ammunition be stored in the same locked gun safe as the firearm? Yes, it can, if the safe itself is securely locked and not easily broken into. Then both the firearm and ammunition may be stored in it together. There is no legal requirement for the ammunition to be in a separate locked container inside the safe, and we're talking about safes, as long as the safe meets the legal standard of secure storage. Follow me so far? Okay, storage of restricted and prohibited firearms. Restricted and prohibited firearms have stricter rules. They must be unloaded and rendered inoperable by a secure locking device like a trigger lock, and placed in a locked container, or stored in a locked gun safe that cannot easily be broken into. Now, an important clarification is, if a restricted firearm is stored in a secure locked gun safe, a trigger lock is not required. The locked safe itself satisfies the regulation for secure storage. So if a restricted firearm is stored in a gun safe, which we'll define in more detail later, can its ammunition be stored in the same gun safe? Yes, according to federal storage regulations, if both the restricted firearm and its ammunition are in the same gun safe, and the safe itself is secure enough to satisfy the legal requirement for both firearms and ammunition storage, that's okay. What qualifies as a legal gun safe? So, what exactly does the law mean when it says a firearm must be stored in a safe that cannot easily be broken into? According to Canadian firearm regulations, a gun safe must, number 1, be locked securely using a key or combination lock, be constructed of solid material such as steel, be difficult to pry open, break, or force entry into without tools. Those 3 points. While the law does not list exact specifications like wall thickness or weight, the safe should be designed specifically for secure firearm storage. A commercially available gun safe is ideal, and not easily movable or ideally bolted to the floor or wall. Resistant to tampering, for example, not made of wood or thin sheet metal. In practical terms, a basic gun cabinet with a keyed lock may not satisfy the not easily broken into requirement if it can be pried open with a screwdriver. On the other hand, a steel gun safe with an internal locking mechanism or digital keypad usually meets the standard. So when in doubt, consult your local CFO and err on the side of choosing a safe designed and marketed for firearm storage.
Display of firearms in residences. Thinking of displaying a firearm in your residence? The law still applies. The firearm must be unloaded, secured with a locking device, and displayed in a way that prevents unauthorized access, and ammunition must not be on display alongside the firearm. Even in a glass cabinet or wall rack, it must meet these requirements. This applies to non-restricted firearms. Display of restricted firearms in residences. Displaying restricted firearms in residences is strictly regulated and must meet the highest legal storage standards. According to the law, the firearm must be unloaded. It must be disabled with a secure locking device, specifically a trigger lock or cable lock. Ammunition must not be on display alongside the firearm, and it must also be securely locked to the structure within the residence, such as a wall or display case frame. Important to keep in mind is the regulations explicitly state that a trigger or cable lock is the only legally accepted method of rendering a restricted firearm inoperable for display purposes. Simply locking it in a display case without disabling it in this way does not meet legal requirements. If you plan to display a restricted firearm, be sure it complies fully with these rules to avoid legal penalties.
Transporting firearms. Heading out to the bush, the range, or back home, non-restricted firearms must be unloaded And if left in a vehicle, they must be locked in the trunk or out of sight in a locked vehicle. Restricted and prohibited firearms must be unloaded, secured with a locking device, placed in a locked opaque container, and transported only for approved reasons with an authorization to transport, the ATT. How to store and transport ammunition. During transport for non-restricted firearms, ammunition does not have to be locked up as long as it is stored separately from the firearm in a secure way. For restricted and prohibited firearms, store the ammunition in the same manner that is prescribed for non-restricted firearms. What about ammunition's accessibility while hunting? Here's where things can get confusing. Canadian law makes a distinction between transportation and use. If you are actively engaged in hunting and your firearm is non-restricted, it's generally acceptable to have ammunition readily accessible in your vehicle as long as the firearm remains unloaded and the vehicle is attended. This means you are present and in control of it. However, if the vehicle is unattended, then both the firearm and the ammunition must be secure. The firearm must be either out of sight, locked in the trunk or other locked vehicle compartment. This approach balances lawful hunting with safe firearms practices and aligns with the actual wording of Canadian firearm transport laws. Keeping a firearm handy at camp. Can it be loaded? If you're camping in the wilderness and keeping a non-restricted firearm handy for protection or hunting, you may wonder if it can be kept loaded. Here's what the law says. In a dwelling or temporary residence like a tent or cabin, there is no law that specifically prohibits having a loaded non-restricted firearm nearby, as long as it is being used for a lawful purpose such as hunting or predator defense. The key is that the firearm must be under your control and not left unattended. However, in or on a vehicle, the firearm must be unloaded, even if you are actively hunting. So at a campsite where you're present and the firearm is under your immediate control, a loaded, non-restricted firearm is generally lawful. Still, always follow common sense and provincial regulations and ensure any storage or handling is done safely and responsibly. Carrying a loaded firearm for wilderness protection. What the law allows. Let's answer a question that comes up a lot, and that is, can I carry a loaded rifle or shotgun while hiking in the wilderness for protection from dangerous wildlife? Well, if you're in a remote wilderness area where hunting is normally permitted and you're legally allowed to possess the firearm, carrying a loaded, non-restricted firearm like a shotgun or rifle for predator protection is not specifically prohibited under federal law. However, provincial laws also apply, and that's where it gets more specific. In Alberta, for example, the Wildlife Act does not prohibit carrying a loaded, non-restricted firearm in Crown land hunting areas. You must still be in an area and time where carrying a firearm is allowed, for instance, not in a restricted zone or park. Do not need to be actively hunting to lawfully possess the firearm as long as you are not discharging it unlawfully. You cannot carry a loaded firearm in provincial or national parks unless specifically authorized, or in vehicles. Firearms must be unloaded during transport, even in wilderness areas. Bottom line, in Alberta, if you're hiking or camping in an area where hunting is generally permitted, you may carry a loaded, non-restricted firearm legally for wilderness protection, as long as it's not in a vehicle and not discharged unlawfully. Still, always be prepared to explain your intent and lawful purpose to conservation officers. Handling firearms safely and legally. Handling your firearm in a lawful way isn't just smart, it's legally required. When not in use, your firearm must be unloaded and either locked or secured in accordance with storage laws. Carrying or handling a loaded firearm in the wrong place, that could be a criminal negligence case. So some final thoughts. Canada does have clear rules for how we store, transport, display, and handle our firearms if we can understand them. Following these rules keeps you legal and helps preserve the public trust in lawful gun ownership, of course.
Little known consequences of firearms law. Let's now cover some subjects that few people talk about or even are aware of. The hidden consequences of Canadian firearms laws. Things that aren't obvious but could have serious legal impact. Carrying airsoft, pellet, or antique guns concealed. Let's talk about that. Under the criminal code, carrying any firearm type device in a concealed manner can be a criminal offense, even if that device is an airsoft gun, pellet gun, or antique firearm. While these may not require registration, carrying them concealed, like tucked in a waistband or hidden in a jacket, can lead to criminal charges. Interestingly, openly carrying these same items while potentially attracting attention is not a criminal offense as long as they're being handled lawfully and not in a prohibited area. But concealment changes the legal situation entirely. Due to recent Supreme Court decisions, even devices like air guns, airsoft guns, and paintball markers, which were once thought to be unregulated, are now subject to certain storage and transportation laws. If these devices are capable of causing serious bodily harm, they may be considered firearms under the criminal code. That means failing to store or transport them properly could potentially lead to criminal charges, even though they are not registered firearms. For reference, see the Supreme Court ruling summarized here, or see the link included in this video's description. Importantly, the courts have also ruled that if it shoots a projectile, like a bullet or a pellet, regardless of whether it travels above or below 500 feet per second, it can legally be classified as a firearm. That includes airsoft guns, pellet rifles, and paintball markers, if they're deemed capable of causing serious injury. This means, for example, that a youth caught carrying an airsoft pistol concealed, even one that shoots plastic pellets under 500 feet per second, could face a criminal charge because the projectile has the potential to cause serious bodily harm, like putting out an eye. Here's some others. Possessing a handgun frame without a lock. Have you ever heard of this one? Just having possession of a restricted handgun frame with no barrel, slide, or trigger lock can potentially result in a criminal conviction. According to current interpretations, the law still requires it to be rendered inoperable by a secure locking device, even in that incomplete state. Loss of license and property seizure. A single mistake, even one without malicious intent, can trigger the revocation of your PAL, your possession and acquisition license. That can also result in the confiscation of all your firearms, often without compensation. Firearms offenses are criminal charges. Remember, violations of storage and transportation laws aren't just provincial fines, they're federal criminal offenses, meaning you could end up with a criminal record even if no one was harmed. And finally, surprising gaps in law enforcement knowledge exist. Not all law enforcement officers or conservation officers are firearms law experts. That means you might need to explain the law calmly and clearly to someone who doesn't fully understand the fine print, but still has the power to charge you. That's why it's critical to know not just the spirit of the law, but the letter of it, because the consequences for honest mistakes can be severe.
Now, if this helped you understand the law better, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Want to support the channel? Tap Super Thanks, or check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. This is the Way to Native Chronicles. Until next time, God bless. Always hunt with purpose and walk with respect.
Did you like this video? If you did, I think you're gonna like this one right over here. So check it out. And I appreciate your subscribing if you haven't done so already. Remember to do that while you're watching this next video. Click like, it all helps us out for this channel. Catch you next time.